based on the services. They have a much better baseline now to actually explain why things cost what they do. And again, at the last point there, we have this idea of the pilot approach again as well, where we don't have to do everything at once. We'd certainly recommend that you take it in a nice, easy, phased approach. Say it introduces it gently. It helps IT get used to the overall process as well as the business. And if we can identify those quick wins, we can really start to gain some real credibility with the business very early on. This slide talks about services needing to be understood and presented as positive elements, and this is what Barclay was really talking about earlier when he had used the example of going into the shop, and you know the sales guys don't crowd around you telling you how bad or wherever things are. They tell you how good things are and the positive things. And really, we need to get that same philosophy and same culture within IT and the business. We need people to understand that services, the provision of those services, the definition of those services, and supporting those services are all good things. And the last part there talks about the definition of services in the service catalog and grouping these services in a hierarchy or structure. By doing that, we're actually providing the baseline, if you like, a good solid foundation from which we can start to build the appropriate, meaningful, and realistic SLAs that we will use to support the actual business. We have an example here on the next slide of the type of hierarchy that we actually provide with Assist, where we've taken a number of IT services and we've tried to break them down into a logical structure, a logical hierarchy. So at the top level, we have IT services, because we could use Assist to give customers other types of services. It could be facility services or HR services. So here we've focused on IT services. From that, we've broken it down into what appears to be the main areas of the IT services. So communication services, for example, is one of the lines there. And underneath that, we have mobile phones, desktop phones, conferencing. So by putting it into this kind of structure, this kind of hierarchy, we're hopefully making it easy to navigate, not just for the IT people that will be creating and maintaining these services, but when we start looking at the user request portal, the actual shopping baskets, if you like, for the end users, hopefully it will make it easy for them to find exactly what they're looking for without any difficulty. So if we look at some of the critical things then that we should be including in the SLA, there's a number of different things. First thing is a simple description of the service and what it delivers. And there's also a point there, obviously, a very important point, which is that we need to do that in business terms. We need to put into business language what the services actually do. We don't want techno-speak or techno-jargon. The business don't understand that. We need to put it in a language that they understand. Remember who the audience for this document is or for these services are, so we need to put it in a language that they will understand. Other types of things we should include: the agreed hours of service. So when is this service going to be available to the users? Perhaps response times. If they are reporting incidents or requests for change, then we need to tell them when they can expect incidents to be fixed or requests for change to actually be resolved. Now again, that's providing we can measure it, so we come on to that a little bit later. But if we're going to put all these times in, and we're going to start to have all these metrics around SLAs and services, then we need to make sure we can actually measure them. Availability of service, again, is another important part, and as Barclay was saying earlier, really, that's really should be around what the business needs, not 99.9% or whatever, but we need to make sure the service is available to the business when they actually need it. Security and data integrity, again, we need to make the users comfortable that their access is secure, their data is secure, that if they have issues with data, we can restore that information. We also need to think about the responsibilities. We've talked a lot about IT providing these services and these SLAs, and obviously IT has a number of responsibilities within that. But the customer has responsibilities as well. The customer needs to report incidents in the correct way or request changes in the proper manner. So it's not just about IT's responsibilities, it is about customer responsibilities to ensure that these services perform as they should actually perform. We also need to include exceptions to the norm as well, where there may be times when performance is degraded for whatever reason, or it's critical business periods and it's extremely busy, will the services and the SLAs and the levels of performance be the same during those times as in normal times? Well, if they're not, we need to document that within the service level agreement so the business knows exactly what to expect in those circumstances. And again, this is a living document, so we need to make sure that we review it on a constant basis, and within the document itself, we need to have the dates for the review, perhaps the last review, the next review, and who from the customer and IT is actually responsible for signing off these documents. This slide is an example, a very simple example of the type of information and the type of format you might want to adopt for your SLA, and it contains the sort of information that we've talked about earlier. And I think the important thing is it's all in business language, and it is one page, relatively, I think, easy to understand. It doesn't have to be 20 or 30 pages, as Barclay was saying, of documentation. And I think the other thing about SLAs is that there are lots of good examples of SLAs around, but there's no one standard that everyone must adopt. You can, if the SLA works for you, it works for you. And you can include anything within that SLA that is important to you and your business. So although there's lots of ideas about what should be included, if you have stuff that needs to be included because of your business, then include it. It's not going to be a problem. So another polling question there, and this one's a simple yes or no about asking whether or not you link any of your key performance indicators to the services you provide and the SLAs you actually currently have. Again, this is the pyramid that we talked about earlier, where we have at the top level the user request view, the portal, where the end users can come in and request services through some intranet web page. The second level then, the business view, this is where we expand upon the information contained within the user request portal. This will include detail about the services, what it is, the SLAs against it, and that type of thing, but also this is where we start to define the reporting and metric requirements against those services. And the final view, the technical view, there is the one which ties this in, ties the service catalog into the CMDB and the underlying IT infrastructure. And that's where we can start to identify dependencies and relationships between all the appropriate IT components that go to make up and support the services within the service catalog. So we've got a few screenshots now that show how this actually works in Assist. We have a form here which shows us in the main body of the form the services, the communication service broken down into the sub-services, mobile phones we showed you earlier, and then below that the offerings, the requests you can make against the mobile phone. So maybe you want an Apple iPhone or BlackBerry, you can request that directly through the portal. And then below that into the telephony service, this is where we hook into the CMDB. So now we can actually start to see the systems and the individual CI components that go to support and make up the mobile phone and communication services. And on the left-hand side, we have the view which shows us all the different services out there in a slightly different view. If we go on to some of the forms then that we use with Assist, the Service Designer, to start creating these services, we've got the formula that creates the offerings, the requests. And you can see from this form that it contains lots of the information that we talked about earlier. So we've got remarks, we've got summary information, which is obviously just a short amount of text to explain what this is, a more detailed description, which might be more detailed technical requirements, and then underneath that a business description, so we can show to the business in their language the information that they need. So on this form we can have different levels of information aimed at different types of people. We also have the ability to attach custom forms against this particular offering, so when they request this offering or this service, it can come up with a form that's actually married to the service itself with all the correct fields and information. And we can even attach a workflow process, so when this request is made, there will be a process that kicks off in the background and drives the completion of the overall process. The other forms that we have there, the one we've been talking about here is mostly is the SLA form, and here we have the sort of information we can store against the SLA tab of this form. So again, we've got different types of detail, different types of information that we can store against this form aimed at different types of people. Again, we have the business description there that will give a summary information to the business about what they can expect in terms of SLAs from this service offering. Below that again we have information about the business hours, so we can start to see what the availability hours of this service are, and also exception dates. So we can say, well, this service is available 365 days a year, except for the days actually listed on the right-hand side. Other information we can store is costs. We mentioned costs, and we talked about how important it is for IT to be able to identify the costs that make up a service, because that allows us to demonstrate value. Here we've got some examples of the types of costs we can store against that particular service offering. And below that, we even have the price. So this is the price we could charge should a business user or a customer want to actually use this service. And the final part, the final tab we have is the visibility tab, which this is where we set the visibility rules, which says who can actually see this service or this service offering. So if we want to offer perhaps only Apple iPhones to maybe VIP users, then we could set that up here. As we've got here, senior management level, that's maybe just for the Apple iPhones, and that would mean that only that group of people would see this particular offering. And of course, we can break this into any type of groups that we actually want. The other thing that's very important when we're talking about user request portals and the ability to request offerings and services is also making it available for people to monitor what's actually happening with the requests. And we've got a couple of screenshots here that show that type of information. The first one really, from an SLA perspective, is showing us a number of requests, and right at the end, the last column, is showing us the resolve time to go. So we're actually seeing here how long we have to go before we start breaching these SLAs. So from a support team perspective, we're very clear about the prioritization of these calls because we know where we need to get them fixed. The one below that is more supplier-based, and this is based on the underpinning contracts with suppliers. Same idea. Again, we have a resolve time to go, but this time it's against the underpinning contract we have for our suppliers. So we can see here two different views that are very, very helpful to IT. One that shows internal support teams when they have to get things done, and one that allows us to monitor how our suppliers are actually performing too. Other types of reporting that we can do, more dashboard type reporting, where on one screen we can have a number of different dashboards. And we've got a number of dashboards up here. I want to concentrate on a few of them. On the top left, we have the service KPI view. This is showing us a number of services, and there we have things like service offerings near breach and service offerings that actually have breached. So we can see very quickly, straight away, where we need to be focusing our attention. On the top right, we have service requests near SLA, again, broken down into the different types of service, so we can see how many within each service are near SLA breach. On the bottom left, percentage of calls resolved with an SLA, so we can actually see from our perspective how well we're doing today in terms of resolving with an SLA and overall in the past month. So we've got some good graphical information here that will give us a heads up on where we should be looking or the types of areas that we should be investigating to help resolve some of these issues. We also need to think here about long-term, perhaps trend reporting as well, rather than just as dashboards. But we need to start thinking about reports that can report over a given time period, a week, a month, or whatever, that starts to show us trends, shows us which type of event is breaching SLA and maybe why it's breaching SLA, because then we can start to feed this information into the service review meetings and hopefully influence the overall continuous service improvement program. Another poll question. So we're just asking here about the SLAs that you currently have. What type of reporting and metrics